So this last week, our command chaplain took our team away on one of those off-site team building things, right? One of those things that I don't usually look forward to, but I'm glad that we had it. You know, those group sessions. And I credit my boss, Chaplain Stewart, with coming up with this great question to ask our group, which really did help us to get to know one another. He simply said at one of our go-rounds, share a little-known fact about yourself. And when we did, we found out that our little-known facts really meshed with one another, and we learned a ton about one another. It was great fun. Well, while I was preparing for this sermon, another little-known fact about my life appeared in my sense of vision and coming out of my reading of the scriptures. This little-known fact is that when I was in 5th grade, my dad says it was 6th grade, but I think it was 5th grade. When I was just getting going, learning how to be a young percussionist, we had a concert in which all of the parents, everyone was there. And I, by myself, was asked to play a bass drum solo. Okay? So now hang on just a minute. Just so you can picture what it would have been like. My dad, I talked to him the other day, I was, 10 or 11, so I'm sorry to say this is like 46 years ago, you know? And I talked to my dad the other day, and my dad was like, yeah, I can't believe that they had you playing a bass drum. Like, that was the craziest thing anybody could imagine. The thing about it is that I still remember the first few bars of the solo. Y'all, do you want to hear it? Yes. All right. So, here's how it went. And then it repeated. And I can't remember the rest. Well, all right. Isn't music wonderful? And by the way, percussionists think that percussion is music. So music is incredible how something could stay with us that long. So do you think that's why I brought the drum to church? No, that was just to get your attention. But the drum, the idea of sound, the idea of producing sound was the picture, was the vision that came to my mind, and then everything seemed to snap together. Because the question I want to ask you is, could I play this drum loudly enough to get your attention? And I'm not going to, I just want to give you an idea. I don't want to scare anyone or startle anyone. I just want to get a sense of maybe how loudly the drum could sound, just to try out. But then the other question is, could I play the drum loudly enough to get God's attention? Aha! That's what Isaiah is talking about. So let's look at Isaiah. Please take out your scripture bulletins. And please draw your focus to the text from Isaiah, right on the front cover of your bulletin. Six lines down toward the right side is the quotation mark we heard. The people are whining. Right? They've been doing their spiritual stuff, fasting, praying, changing their garments, playing their drum as loudly as they could. And here's the quote. Why do we fast? But you, God, do not see. Why do we humble ourselves, but you don't notice? See the connection with the drum? We can't play our drum loudly enough to get God's attention. God is here. As Daniel reminded us last week, God is in our most silent meditation of our heart. God is present. We don't need to get God's attention. What is God interested in? We'll turn the page of your bulletin, please, to the second side. Second line down, right in the middle. Through Isaiah's prophecy, we get an idea of what this fasting spiritual discipline could look like. Is not this the fast that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice. To undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to break every yoke. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, to bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall come before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, Here I am. That's more like it. The scriptures and the reflections on the scriptures provide for us this beautiful cadence, meter, pace, outward, not to gratify our own desires, but to fulfill the needs of the community. But haven't we all experienced this loud drum playing at some point in our lives? Haven't you ever had anybody send you an email that says, we're praying for this one person. Please spread the word to every prayer list you can possibly come up with. Why? So that if we get to 5,000 petitioners, we'll wake God up from God's slumber to hear our prayer? We have to think theologically. I've gotten that sense from prayer requests before. Haven't you? But just before church this morning, Wynn brought a new name to the prayer list. A person thousands of miles away. But when he did so, he brought it with the intention that our community would wrap our arms of prayer around this person, so that when this person hears that we are praying for her, she might be soothed and calmed by the fact that even all the way across the Atlantic, there is a parish praying. You see the difference? Is not this the kind of fast I have chosen? So I'd like to give you two other scriptures. You could just mark the citations down right there under the Isaiah passage. I'd encourage you to look them up in your own Bibles. I'll just give you the two citations, and then I'll move along and then wrap it up. I'm going to give you Matthew 23, 23, and 24. So just put Matt 23, 23. And Micah 6:8 from the Old Testament, one of the minor prophets, Micah 6:8. In these two passages, we get the same sense of meter, the same sense that these are the important things of God, as opposed to loud drum playing. In Matthew 23, 23, and 24, Jesus says, Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you bunch of hypocrites. For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, but you've neglected the weightier matters of justice mercy, and faith. It is these you ought to have practiced without neglecting the others. You see, it's not that fasting and prayer are bad. They're great. It's not that tithing, mint and dill and cumin are bad. It's a great thing. In fact, we need to keep the lights on. But the reason why we fast and pray and tithe and set up a Lenten discipline is to draw us closer to God, not to draw God closer to us. Yeah? You see the difference? And the reason why we tithe is not to show how great and holy we are and what we're willing to give up. The reason why we tithe is to reflect to ourselves the fact that God owns 100% of all my assets, and I'm going to return 1/10 of those as a discipline to myself to remind me that God is the owner. And then what do we do with those tithes? We reach out into the community and we bring the poor and the homeless into our house. Is that cool or what? Micah 6:8 says, "He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God?" I went home a couple of weeks ago for the funeral of a saintly person in our community in Sheridan, Wyoming, Duprey King. And she was one of the pillars of our church and our community and really the whole Western saddle-making, rope-making culture. If you know any cowboy who has ever thrown a lariat, they would know about King Ropes in Sheridan, Wyoming, because she and her husband, Don, essentially founded the whole industry in the U.S. of rope making. And when we shared words celebrating Dippy's life, another cowboy, Roger St. Clair, brought this quote to me from Lou Holtz and said, "Would you please share this because it epitomizes Dippy's life?" And Lou Holtz, the great football coach, said, "If you want to be truly happy, add value to other people's lives." And we figured that Dippy must have been the happiest person in the world. See the connection with the scriptures? Adding value to the lives of one another and to our community. Guess what, folks? Y'all are the salt of the earth. I love salt. In fact, it's been said that I salt salt. So much do I love salt. And my children, who are now grown, can quote my father speaking to me across the table at dinner when I was in elementary school, about the same time I had this bass drum solo. And my dad used to say to me, and my children can quote him perfectly, "David, you were going to have hardening of the arteries before you're 14. They can quote him. Or alternatively, he would say, "David, you eat your supper with your fork in your right hand and the salt shaker in your left hand." I love salt. And I love y'all. And I did not realize until preparing for this sermon that that's what I'm doing up here. Salting salt. Y'all are the preservation, the taste, the light, the salt of the earth. So how you doing, church? Are you feeling a little more salty? Because when we live our lives according to this meter, this tone, this pace, this cadence that the Scriptures point us toward, then we will come peacefully to our beds every night, and we will lay our heads on our pillow, and we will whisper to God, and God will say, "Here I am."